the shadow of death, and I fear no evil because I'm blind to it all. In my mind, my gun, they comfort me.
Yep, that's me. You're probably wondering how I ended up in this situation.
Hello there, ladies and gentlemen. It has been far too long since I've come to you with a video, so I know I'm very glad to be back here, and I hope you're glad to be back here too, because I really do appreciate you. If you're anything like me, you have mixed feelings when it comes to reviews. I'm not really a fan of the numerical scoring system because it just seems so arbitrary. What one person would give a 7 out of 10 for a feature being included or perhaps not included, someone else may give that very same game a 6.5 or even an 8 out of 10. You know, it's really the age-old debate. This game has too much water, so it sucks. Then you have somebody else who says, well, there actually isn't enough water, so it sucks. But then you have people who say that they love water, and the same goes for the star system, or pick whatever item you want, 5 oranges out of 5 or 10 zucchinis out of 10. I don't know why I'm talking about fruit and vegetables, but whatever. Now on the opposite side of this spectrum, you have reviewers like ACG who does his reviews based on a scale of like buy, rent, wait for a sale, things like that, and I think that's a much better system overall. When everything is said and done though, we watch and we read reviews from people whose opinions we trust. We find somebody who has similar tastes to what we enjoy, and that's how we gauge whether or not we're going to be interested in a game or film or whatever it is. Now you have access media sites like IGN, GameSpot, Game Informer, and many others. They've become more and more out of touch with the gaming community as time has gone on, and that has become ever the more apparent with the release of The Last of Us 2. Since the release of The Last of Us 2, we've seen many gamers take to Metacritic to voice their displeasure with the game, which is in stark contrast of the love and praise that it's getting from traditional access games media. Join me in today's video where I'm going to be taking you on a journey, starting all the way back in 2013. We're going to embark on this adventure, and I'm going to give you some insight as to why players are taking to review platforms to express their displeasure with The Last of Us 2. We're also going to be briefly touching on review bombing and why this may be occurring with Naughty Dog's latest blockbuster title. Buckle up, we're going in dry just like how Abby enjoys her sex. The Last of Us 2 is one of the most hyped games in recent memory. It's Naughty Dog's follow-up to the insanely popular stealth action game, The Last of Us. Who could have guessed that title, right? I really enjoyed The Last of Us. I mean, it wasn't perfect, not by any means. The combat didn't feel all of that great, and the level design did feel a bit gamey, with environments feeling like they were set up by game designers rather than being a part of an organic world. You know that feeling you get? It's like an arena-type game where there's just stacks of conveniently placed boxes to take cover behind. The gameplay wasn't awful per se. I mean, if it was, I wouldn't have finished the game, but what really kept me coming back was the characters and the narrative. I really enjoyed getting to know Ellie and Joel, being able to accompany them on this grand adventure, and at the end, I was left wanting more. Now let's jump forward to the reveal trailer of The Last of Us 2. It's a very somber trailer. You have a grown-up Ellie strumming a guitar, and she's singing a song about walking a path of death and suffering and what's to follow. Sorrow. Being haunted by the ghosts of her past, ghosts of those that she's killed in her righteous journey for revenge. Joel enters with his back to the camera and he asks,
"What are you doing, kiddo?" You really gonna go through with this?
In which Ellie responds with,
I'm gonna find. And I'm gonna kill. Every last one of them.
Now, I found this to be an incredibly effective trailer. It certainly made me look forward to what was to come. I need it! But as most games these days, as time went on, I began to see a sea of red flags. Did you get what I did there? I'm so sorry. This game started setting off alarm bells in my head. There was something that was telling me it was not going to be something that I was going to enjoy. And I think in order for you to understand my perspective, I have to elaborate a little bit. And I'm going to do that starting with... Back in 2013 at VGS, Neil Druckmann, writer and vice president of Naughty Dog, conducted a presentation that allowed people to get a glimpse at some behind-the-scenes workings of Naughty Dog and Neil Druckmann's creative process. And boy, well, just take a look for yourselves.
The twist, the thing that was different about this idea was that it only infected women. And you found the one girl that it didn't infect, and that was Ellie. And you kind of protected her and tried to like bring her to this lab where they were kind of finding a cure. And there were a lot of things that we were really excited about this idea, but ultimately it failed. And the reason it failed is because it was a misogynistic idea.
And it doesn't end there, oh no. Neil has to make sure that you know how disgusted he is with the depiction of women in video games. I mean, after all, he is the moral authority. As a man, he has to tell you how not sexist he is, because obviously that's how that works, right? You have to say that you're not sexist now. People don't just assume that you're not a piece of shit.
This Kickstarter happened about the tropes versus women in video games. And while you might argue with the way it delivers its message or whether every point is exact, you can't argue with just the pattern that you see in the industry. More specifically, I'm talking about our female characters. And whether we want to admit it or not, these are role models. And yet we sexualize, we objectify, we marginalize, and we reduce these female characters to a lot less than they can be. And we reduce these female characters to a lot less than they can be. A lot less than they can be. We objectify. We marginalize. And we reduce these female characters to a lot less than they can be.
Now, this is an argument that's been cropping up more and more in modern gaming, and I actually did a video on this a while ago discussing toxic feminism, and you can check that out right up here. I'll leave a little annotation. Go ahead and click on that after you watch this video. These feminists and male feminists alike demonize the female form. They seem to actively despise femininity and reject what is traditionally attractive when it comes to a woman's physical appearance or behavior. Move over, Lara Croft. You have to make room for Trailblazer. And I mean, you really have to make room. Look at this fucking bore. I covered this a tiny bit in a previous video, but it pertains to this video as well. You have these pathetic male feminists who feel the need to tell you and tell women what's best for them. That's right, honey, shut your fucking mouth, the men are speaking. This is what you should actually look like. This is what's actually acceptable when it comes to portraying women in video games. Kinda like the moronic male feminist ally who tried to get the absolutely wonderful Melanie Mack fired from her job as a GameStop host because she loves the original design of Lara Croft. And I mean, who doesn't? Look at this woman, my god. Neil Druckmann isn't alone in this holy crusade to body shame attractive and badass women in video games, though. No, he has a partner in crime. I wonder who that could be. Any guesses, ladies and gentlemen? I absolutely loathe when I have to put Anita in any of my videos because that means I have to listen to her speak in order to get the clips necessary for my video, which, god damn it, it's just torture. Haven't I suffered enough? But then I have the added guilt of knowing that you, the viewer, my lovely viewers, have to experience this pain as well, and I'm so sorry. Please forgive me. In 2014, Neil Druckmann's dream came true. He was given the opportunity to present the Game Developer's Choice Award to his favorite person in the gaming industry. Someone who clearly has a deep-rooted passion for the gaming community. Certainly not somebody who's mentally unhinged, somebody who's proclaimed that everything is racist and everything is sexist. I mean, it would be crazy to give an award to somebody who uses the games industry to push their horribly flawed political ideology, right? Anita Sarkeesian, the savior of gaming. The woman... Oh wait, is that sexist to say now? Oh shoot. The person who saved countless video games by injecting a fat old dose of political correctness into them. We've seen what her work can do with games like Call of Duty. We had Call of Duty developers having Anita come into their game development studios and advise them. She was making sure that Nazis were represented by people of all races and genders, because we all know how inclusive those Nazis were, don't we?
Die Juden.
Well, to be fair, I guess they weren't really Nazis. There was no swastikas in the game. It was kind of just the good people in green versus the bad people in gray, which I found kind of odd for a World War II shooter, but whatever. She was also hired as a temp advisor over at EA, so I guess just chalk that up to another brilliant move on EA's behalf. EA really knows exactly how to get players on their good side. Include somebody who hates video games and is incredibly divisive. That's going to solve all of your problems. So, Neil Druckmann, he got to live out his wildest fantasies, his dream come true, to present his waifu, Anita Sarkeesian, this very important and prestigious award. Where she had an excellent acceptance speech.
To that, I'd first like to thank all the women who have been diligently...
So we have Neil Druckmann, self-proclaimed male feminist with his not-so-secret feminist agenda, who loves to preach about how woke he is and how sorry he is to be just another white man in gaming who clearly can't stop being sexist solely by existing. I guess he really should just give up his position of power to a woman, right? I mean, that's really the only way you can prove you're not sexist, so better get the fuck out of here, right, Neil? I mean, hell, maybe Anita can take over for him over at Naughty Dog. We aren't done yet, though. No, it doesn't stop with Neil and Anita at these two events. The way in which games are covered pre-release isn't all on the shoulders of the game's developers or the studios that are publishing the game, but they still play a role in crafting a narrative. They do have a responsibility to come out and correct any kind of misinformation or perhaps maybe give some more clarity when a story breaks. Like when stories started to come out about the enemies that we were going to be facing in The Last of Us 2. This article is titled, "The Last of Us 2 villains are reportedly homophobic Christians." Now, I'm pretty sure there's some Christians and conservatives who are interested in playing The Last of Us 2, and I'm not too sure how they feel about being the enemies in this game, but that's something that Naughty Dog could have addressed, right? They could have come out and said something. Christians and conservatives are popular groups to characterize as enemies. We've seen this in The Punisher Season 2 and the Watchmen series. When talking about video games, a fairly recent example was Far Cry 5, where you play as a deputy sheriff who's tasked with taking down an extremely zealous religious cult that's taken over Hope County, Montana. And it's kind of funny because you had sites like The Verge who said that the game wasn't taking on, quote, far-right separatism and, quote, gun culture enough, but hey, you can never really be woke enough, right? But then on the other hand, you had Polygon writing an article about this alleged Trump P videotape mission in the game. What the fuck? Anyway, the point is clearly, conservatives are insanely religious nutcases who can't help but be triggered by the big gay. Bringing this back to The Last of Us 2, like I said, we saw similar articles coming out like this one. The Last of Us Part 2 is rumored to be a tale of bloody revenge against a homophobic Christian cult. That's right, those goddamn snaggletooth hicks hate Ellie because she's into vagini. But if you buy The Last of Us 2, if you give us your money, you, yes you, can stick it to the alt-right. Shortly before release, hours of gameplay, including the ending with major spoilers, was leaked out. There's still speculation as to who the leaker was. There was rumors that it was actually a disgruntled Naughty Dog employee who wasn't getting paid. Sony has since come out to refute that claim, however they've not provided any further info other than, quote, they are not affiliated with Sony or Naughty Dog. With these leaks being so close to the release of the game, Sony and Naughty Dog panicked, and they began to strike down any and all videos that not only included the leaks themselves, but also videos covering the fact that the leaks even existed. Sony and Naughty Dog was using this third-party company by the name Muso to take down what they deemed to be problematic content, even if that content fell well within fair use. Now, I've said this before and I'm going to say it again. I'm all for companies protecting their intellectual property. However, when it comes to the discussion, critique, and parody of leaks, you don't get to control that. I mean, hell, it was to the point where they were issuing DMCA takedowns not only on YouTube, but also on Twitter over memes. So you have them going after people on Twitter, myself included, and they also went after channels like Heels vs. Babyface, RK Outpost, and Lethal Lightning, going as far as to issuing copyright strikes on their channel. That's one surefire way to get the gaming community on your side, Neil. The Last of Us 2 released on June 19th of this year to glowing praise and love from all of the big gaming news outlets. Just take a look at this picture here. Game Informer, 10 out of 10. IGN, 10 out of 10. VG247, 10 out of 10. GamesBeat, 9.5 out of 10. Gaming Trend, 10 out of 10. You get the picture. Damn, it seems like critics really love this game. I mean, just look at some of these taglines. One of the best games ever made, Washington Post. An unforgettable experience, Shack News, and mind blown, GameXplain. Now, I'm not going to sit here and say that all of these people were bought and paid for by Sony and Naughty Dog, but I do find it odd when you have this massive amount of praise coming from Access Games journalists who don't even seem concerned with feigning any sense of critical thought. It's almost as if they're afraid to be critical of the game due to fear of fan backlash because there's some pretty fucking zealous fans of this game. Or perhaps they're afraid of being called homophobic or transphobic, fatphobic, who fucking knows? Or maybe, just maybe, they're afraid of having their access revoked and they're not going to be able to cover Naughty Dog's and Sony's games early anymore, which is obviously going to have a huge negative impact on their web traffic and their video clicks, and we can't have that now, can we? Now, I want to be clear that this is purely speculative on my behalf. I'm not accusing any individual of this, it's simply how it comes across to me. Although I do find it incredibly odd that Sony is now reaching out to reviewers who left negative reviews about The Last of Us 2. I sense some insecurity on their behalf, but I think that's kind of reasonable, especially when you look at the user Metacritic score. Now, I don't believe I'm alone in taking reviews with a grain of salt, especially when they're coming from major game news outlets. I'm much more likely to listen to reviews from independent YouTubers and the players themselves. That doesn't just go for video games, I mean, the same can be said about movies and television shows as well. If you want to see reviews and collective scores, there are two massive sites that allow people to do just that, and they are Metacritic and Rotten Tomatoes. These sites are by no means perfect, especially Rotten Tomatoes, which has been accused of manipulating and tampering scores, but that's a topic for another video altogether. What makes the Metacritic scores for The Last of Us 2 so interesting is that there is this massive disparity between user reviews and critic reviews. This isn't necessarily unique to The Last of Us 2, however. We've seen large disparities in review scores from the latest Dave Chappelle Netflix special. It was torn apart by critics for being insensitive and triggering, go figure, all of these pussies. It's sitting at a 35% rotten. The score from people who possess brains and a sense of humor, however, gave it a 99%. That is a massive disconnect between critics and fans. Now, what I think is an even better comparison would be The Last of Us 2 and The Last Jedi. The Last Jedi is easily the most divisive film in Star Wars history, and that's reflected in the Rotten Tomatoes score. TLJ is currently sitting at a 90% fresh for the critic score and a 43% rotten for the user score. Now, this is relatively close to The Last of Us 2 scores on Metacritic. I wonder why that is. Could it have something to do with the pretentious creator being so far up his own ass that fans find him insufferable? Or could it be that the decisions made in the work in question betrayed the good faith of fans by only being interested in subverting expectations? And this, ladies and gentlemen, is what leads us into review bombing. Review bombing is when a large group of people leave mass negative reviews, and this can be done for many reasons. I mean, we've seen this take place during the disastrous PC launch of Batman Arkham Knight. Players flocked to the Steam page to voice their displeasure with the launch of the game, which was so broken, it was essentially unplayable. Now, something to keep in mind is that review bombing can be viewed as a way in which the community at large feels about a game. But what exactly are their motivations? Are games review bombed because hardcore fans are upset with the studio or a specific creator? Are they unhappy with certain business practices that are being implemented by a company? Or is the game simply so incredibly bad from both a mechanical and storytelling standpoint that it's upsetting to players and they can't help but vent out their displeasure? In the case of The Last of Us 2, I would argue that it's a mixture of all of these things. Now, this led me to the question of, is review bombing a representation of the game's quality? What I mean by this is, should reviews be completely based around the game itself with no extraneous factors? Or do games and the surrounding circumstances of that game affect the game as a final product? I think both are valid, but obviously I have my own personal opinion on this, which I'll be sharing with you now. I, for one, believe that it's the latter. In the case of The Last of Us 2, the game is beautiful from a graphical standpoint, and the attention to detail in the environments is certainly something to behold. With that being said, however, I've shown you Neil Druckmann's clear and unquestionable political agenda that he wanted to push when it came to the story of The Last of Us 2. To me, this had a considerably negative impact on my enjoyment of the game, and I don't believe that I'm alone in that feeling. Recently, Sony and Naughty Dog have seen massive drop-off in sales, estimated to be around 80%, and that's to me just another clear indication that word of mouth is spreading and players aren't happy. I look at user scores as a way to tap directly into the community sentiments, especially with a game as high profile as The Last of Us 2, where you have a ton of players to pull from. When I think of review bombing, I'm always questioning what could have caused this, and the answer is typically that the studio in question has done something to make their community so upset that they feel this overwhelming urge and need to voice their complete displeasure en masse with what they purchased. It may not always come down to things like the game's mechanics or the game feel necessarily, but when the message of a game is found to be so unappealing to fans, does this not reflect the quality of the game? I would argue that it does. I've seen some absolutely moronic check marks on Twitter saying that players are not meant to enjoy playing this game. that it's supposed to make you feel miserable. Hell, even Neil and Naughty Dog said themselves, saying idiotic things like we don't use the word fun in our offices, and that players are supposed to feel bad when playing the game. I mean, that's why they put these stupid screams in the game and they gave the characters names, like the NPCs have names. Like, that's supposed to make you feel guilty for killing these pixels on your screen. Like, God, get over yourself. If players don't find enjoyment in playing your game, can you really expect them to show overwhelming support in their reviews? I don't think you can. I don't know how we got to this point of giving your fans something that they're going to love and enjoy becoming a bad thing. I mean, this is not to say that you can't have dark endings or leave players in a state of shock. Look at Avengers Infinity War and the Snap, people loved that shit. In the case of The Last of Us 2, we're seeing the same reaction as The Last Jedi, or at least one that's very similar. Overwhelming critical praise from sycophantic access media personnel, and a general fan base who's left unsatisfied or upset of the treatment of beloved characters simply for the sake of subversion and shock value. I've seen some people using the same argument for The Last of Us 2 as they did with The Last Jedi, and that argument is, well, it made money, so obviously it's good. You're wrong. You're just mad that this game profited. And I find that logic to be flawed on so many levels. I mean, Transformers films made a shitload of money, but I wouldn't necessarily call those masterpieces of cinema, and at least those films gave fans something that they enjoyed. I mean, when your game's sitting at a user score that's very much similar to Hunt Down the Freeman, you did something wrong. You fucked up somewhere. Somewhere down the line, something went wrong. Eventually, your fans, your community is going to abandon you if they're not happy with what's coming out of your studio. I don't want games to suck. I don't want companies to fail. I want good games that people can enjoy. I just want to see companies treat their fans with a little respect. Don't dismiss them as angry incels, because eventually people are going to be sick of being berated and insulted, and when that time comes, you're not going to have any fans to sell to. And that does it for today's video. If you made it this far, I really appreciate it because I didn't expect this video to be this long. I guess I had more to say about this than I thought I did. Now, if you bought The Last of Us 2 and you're enjoying it, I'm glad. Like I said, I want people to be able to enjoy a game. I just think they massively fucked this up. I am not a fan of Neil Druckmann. I am not a fan of Naughty Dog and the way that they've handled this entire situation, this entire launch of this game, to be frank, but hey, as always, I want to know what you think about all of this. If you picked up The Last of Us 2, tell me what you think about it. Do you think I'm wrong? Let me know down in the comments below. Are you somebody that sides with the user scores? Again, let me know down in the comments below. I would love to start a discussion on this. As always, don't forget to follow me on Twitter at MetalGearMando. Thank you so much for watching. Stay safe, and until next time, I will see you in the next video.